Aloha, welcome back. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Talavi Cook. She grew up in the desert of southwestern United States, where her people, culture, and land have been a source of healing, challenges, and motivation for her to pursue a higher education. One of Delavi's many strengths is her ability to see connectivity. Delavi is driven to bring ideas and people together. And as such, Delavi selected a professional internship that practices these very same things. Please welcome Delavi.
Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me? If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up, Lisa.
We can hear you. Great. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for coming to my presentation today. My name is Talavi Cook. I come from Pueblo, New Mexico, and I attended the TCBES program in Hawaiʻi for the past 2 years, and this is my internship that I was able to complete. So the title is Conserving Traditional Agroecosystems by Combining Principles of Permaculture and Pueblo Practices. So we're gonna go over my outline. So I'm gonna be talking about modern agriculture, and then I'll go into the subject of agroecology. Then I'll talk about my actual internship and the background and like the purpose. Then I'll go into detail on my projects. Then it'll lead into my discussion and conclusion. So in the late 19th century, just right after World War II, conventional agriculture was developed for the purpose of building food security and economy, which then became a widespread practice around the globe where people would now depend on it for living and consumption. Currently, conventional agriculture dominates 90% of the world's 1.5 billion hectares and highly dependent on the use of external input of energy from fossil fuels and synthetic chemicals to exhibit yields of crop productivity. Some examples of conventional agriculture include heavy irrigation, intensive tillage, or concentrated monoculture production, which you can find in the Midwest US or even in Hawaii. Unfortunately, conventional agriculture is an unsustainable practice system and is a major contributor to climate change. It emits 17 to 32% of anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions, such as carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. It has also given rise to the use of developing new pesticides within GMO farms due to insects and weeds constantly building resistance to these chemicals, which is also known as pesticide treadmill. If the practice of conventional agriculture continues into the future, the resulting factors will make the systems vulnerable to pests, to diseases, climate change, and this will in turn include the loss of biodiversity and lower yields. So this tells us that conventional agriculture is not an optimal system. Therefore, there is a need to find a new agricultural paradigm. So the challenge in the coming decades is to rethink and seek a new agricultural paradigm to increase food production substantially and sustainably. The future agricultural system must step away from fossil fuel dependence, be nature friendly, and have low environmental impacts, serve multiple functions, be resilient to climate change, and be a foundation for local food sources, including indigenous and local innovations. This in turn will have a high productivity, efficiency, and biodiversity with high recycling rates and have high levels of synergy and integration. These new systems are based on the term agroecology, or the practice of agroecology. So this agroecology is the science of ecological concepts and the principles to the structure and management of sustainable agricultural systems. Therefore, we call these systems agroecosystems, which seeks to develop an ecological structure that does not need external inputs and allow the necessary interaction among species for the system to work, which in space and time appears to maintain a steady yet dynamic equilibrium. Such an equilibrium is based on the complex of set of biological, physical, chemical, ecological, and cultural interactions, determining the processes that permit us to improve the soil fertility, achieve crop productivity, and crop protection. So these are the principles of agri-ecosystem. The first one is to recycle biomass and balance nutrients. The second one is to manage organic matter and enhance soil biotic activity. The third is the microclimate management of water, soil, solar, and air. And then number 4 is to conserve genetic and species diversity. And the last is to enhance biological interaction and synergisms. For agroecosystems principles to be applied correctly, we need to understand how people have designed these systems and what type of knowledge was used to nurture the management practices. Indigenous people are actually prime examples of mastering agroecosystems designed to their long immediate relationship with the physical environment and their practice of traditional ecological knowledge, or TEK. These systems are called traditional agroecosystems. These systems provide many examples of how culture and its local environment have co-evolved over time through processes that balance the needs of people expressed as ecological, technological, and socioeconomic factors. Therefore, these systems can serve as a starting point for the conversion to more environmentally sound management practices. However, with anthropogenic climate change, Indigenous people are predicting that the environments around the globe will go through extreme weather shifts, causing long-term catastrophic events, which in turn will dramatically impact Indigenous communities to be more vulnerable than they already are. Therefore, Indigenous people cannot romanticize TEK to fight against climate change or any future environmental threats, and are actually seeking new strategies that can incorporate their traditional practices. And I believe that creating a dialogue between both TEK and the Western scientific approach can offer both key insights and philosophical frameworks for addressing environmental issues such as climate change, pollution, and environmental health disparities. With both of these philosophical frameworks in mind, I was able to find an internship that incorporates principles of permaculture and Pueblo practices at Flowering Tree Permaculture Institute located in Santa Clara, Pueblo, New Mexico. Flowering Tree Permaculture Institute is a nonprofit organization that was created by Roxanne Swensel and Joel Glansberg in 1987. And its mission is to nurture healthy communities through practices based on Indigenous ways of knowing. Roxanne is from the reservation of Santa Clara, Pueblo, and she recognizes that many people, not only her community, but other Pueblo communities, are currently in poor health, and feels that it is important to revitalize traditional knowledge to land management and conserving agroecosystems now. Roxanne believes that conserving traditional agroecosystems is an important nation-building tactic which empowers our people through self-determination, ultimately leading to a vibrant and joyous way of life for us and future generations to come. As Flowering Tree integrates land resources, people, and the environment through mutually beneficial synergies, it also applies holistic solutions that are applicable within Santa Clara Pueblo and other Pueblo communities. Flowering Tree sets an example of being a multidisciplinary toolbox, which includes agriculture, seed saving, animal husbandry, traditional food processing, water harvesting, hydrology, energy, natural building, forestry, waste management, aquaculture, appropriate green technology, economics, and community development. And here is a map of New Mexico. And these are the different pueblos that are within New Mexico, and there are 19 of them. Santa Clara is right here, I believe. And my village is right here, but I worked at this pueblo. Flowering Tree has 4 locations and has implemented projects far and wide of northern New Mexico. The first location is at Santa Clara Pueblo, and it started first at Roxanne's house, and the property is only about an acre, half acre. At first, the land was very fallow, but over time with Roxanne doing permaculture and traditional practices, she was able to establish a microecosystem. And so this is her house here, and this is her little ecosystem. And here is a map of New Mexico, and this just show you like where the state is within the United States. and then it zooms into more of where the locations are within New Mexico. Over the years, Roxanne obtained more land around New Mexico and northern New Mexico and is able to expand projects far and wide. One of the other properties is actually located across the Rio Grande River from the Pueblo and is within the Spanish community called San Pedro. This land measures out to be about 2 acres and is actually where most of the projects are being held. The next land property is located in Agric Lake, which is about 40 miles north of Santa Clara, Pueblo, and it measures out to be 50 acres of land. This land is adjacent to the Chama River, which feeds into Agric Lake, and this water system is able to feed into the Rio Grande system. And so this is in the northern area. You can see the reservoir at the top. The last property is about 120 acres and is located near Cuba, which is about 80 miles west of Santa Clara, Pueblo. This land has very minimal development, and I would consider it prime land to coexist with nature, and there's no need for much conservation efforts. These properties are within high desert climate regions and sit at an elevation from 5,000 to 7,000 feet and may experience all 4 seasons throughout the year. The ecozones of the properties include desert and basin, juniper and scrub, plains and mesa, and riparian habitats of willows and cottonwoods. It is also like through traditional knowledge that Pueblo people have thrived off these ecosystems and ecoregions for a long time. That when Spanish settlers were able to come here, they were having to adopt some Pueblo strategies into their lifestyles in order for them to survive. So the purpose of my internship is to learn the maintenance to sustain a traditional agri-ecosystem. As it is Flower and Tree's mission to nurture healthy communities, the purpose of the internship is to immerse into principles of permaculture combined with Pueblo practices. To gain understanding and skills of permaculture and Pueblo traditions, I was required to shadow Roxanne on daily projects. The use of these practices were not only to learn how to live sustainably, it is also about learning the process of coexisting with nature and learning the design of a traditional agri-ecosystem. Overall, the internship is to focus on maintaining the traditional agri-ecosystem by emphasizing interactions of synergisms among the many biological components of agri-ecosystems to enhance recycling and biological control, thus improving overall ecological efficiencies and environmental protection. To sustain a traditional agri-ecosystem, Flower and Tree had multiple projects and needed to be completed during the summer. My responsibility was to learn how to each project works and to develop special attention and skills to complete each project. There was an overall of a total of 14 projects to complete, and I was able to place them within 5 categories. The first one is land restoration, and it includes removing invasive species, planting native species, mulching, and composting. The next was animal management, which is the practice of animal husbandry. The third is traditional nourishment, where we learned how to do traditional agriculture, learn how to take care of a seed bank and do inventory, and how to do traditional food processing. And then you have the community involvement, where we did the Pueblo food diet and we had outreach. And then the last one was structured development maintenance, where we were able to build and repair things and keep things maintained. So at Santa Clara, there are numerous black locust trees around the property, and there is a need to remove these trees due to being a non-invasive species to New Mexico, non-native species to New Mexico. Roxanne and I try to remove each tree within the with cutters and clippers, or with the chainsaw, and we were able to take all the branches and put them inside the goat's pen so that the goats can eat the foliage off the branches, and as they ate all the foliage off the branches, we were disposing of we disposed of branches at the nearest dump site. And this is what it looks like after you thin out the trees, and this is to prevent any fuel for fire or erosion. At San Pedro, there are 2 different types of invasive plant species growing around the property, which are the Virginia creeper vines and the Chinese elms. And to get rid of them, we use clippers, and I was able to keep these plants contained throughout the whole internship. At San Pedro, there is a need of removing invasive species along the fence line that encloses the agricultural field. It is imperative to remove these plants to help promote growth for other native plants nearby. So throughout every week of the internship, I was able to remove these invasive species plants along the fence line and keep it contained throughout the internship. And this is the after photo of it being contained or being removed. At San Pedro, there are many uninvited invasive plants that are growing in between the rows of each crop field. If invasive plants keep continuing to grow within the crop field, it would take up most of the nutrients and most of the waters to not feed the other crops. So therefore, we had to remove them. At the beginning of the internship, the field manager and I were the only 2 people out there removing these species, but we decided to get a collective of people from the employees of Flowering Tree and the community members to come together and remove these species, and we were able to accomplish this within 1 weekend. In Agric, there is a need to also remove invasive plants, such as these salt cedar seedlings. They are growing along the bank of the property, and if we don't remove them, they can become bigger and cause erosion and also make fuel for fire as well. So every time we went out to the Agric property, we would always try to remove these seedlings. At San Pedro, there is a desire to plant native species along the fence line near the agricultural field to restore the land by providing the necessary nutrients to the soil, promote plant biodiversity, and attract pollinators, specifically native pollinators. At the beginning of the internship, one of my first tasks was to plant these native species along the fence line, and some of them were wax currants, Indian rice grass, sagebrush, agave, some perennial flowers, gamble oak, Navajo tea, and ephedra. Throughout the internship, it was my responsibility to water the plants every other day to help the plants grow to its full potential. I usually water the plants either early morning or early evening, and they were able to be contained throughout the whole internship. At San Pedro, a mulching technique was experimented to see if plants can grow productively. This mulching technique uses different types of organic matter to retain moisture in soil, keeping soil at a cooling temperature, and improve soil fertility as it decomposes and suppresses weeds. We use a layering mechanism of peat soil mix with goat manure as the bottom layer, used blank cardboard as a second layer, and added more peat soil mixture for the third layer, and then topped it off with straw bale hay. The indication that this technique worked was that many native plants were grown productively throughout the internship, and were able to identify that this technique was successful. And so here is a photo of, I don't know who this man is, but he was watering the plants. Another way to add nutrients to soil is the practice of composting. Composting is the process of producing your own natural fertilizer that is made from organic matter, such as leftover fruit and vegetables and other biodegradable items, and later return valuable nutrients to the soils. If Flowering Tree did not have an established composting bin or area, therefore it was my responsibility to build one. And so I was able to use some old crates and drill them together, and there's me dumping out some food into the compost bin. And so it is being continued. This practice is being continued today within the Institute. So the second part of the internship was to focus on animal management, the practice of animal husbandry. So animals domesticated by Flowering Tree have turkeys, chickens, goats, a rabbit, and some fish. These animals are located in Santa Clara, Pueblo, and need to be nourished every day for nutrient intake and growth development. Each animal has its own specific food diet and was able to nourish them every day and to keep the animals survive, and I was able to accomplish all their nourishment. Throughout the internship, there was no animals that were harmed, and so animals were able to continue use for supplying food, manure, and cultural purposes. At Santa Clara Pueblo, a garden was established using the intercropping technique for the purposes of maintaining soil fertility and maximizing yields due to biological interactions within the Agroecosystem. Plants that were cultivated were corn, beans, gourds, which are the three sisters, watermelon, and amaranth. These native crops were planted to increase the presence of beneficial insects, attract the greater abundance of pollen and nectar sources, to biologically fix nitrogen within corn through mycorrhizal fungi connection with the roots of beans. This garden was watered every day to help crops produce the most nutrient-based foods for the Santa Clara Pueblo community. Throughout some days of the internship, I was able to water and watch these crops grow to a good size. However, I was not able to be in attendance to the full potential of their growth because my internship ended in August. And so here is a picture of what it looks like after you do the intercropping method. At the agricultural field in San Pedro, the method of crop rotation was used to cultivate traditional foods. The cultivation process requires the planting field to be in an area that holds both clay and sandy soils. That's where crops grow best. The field also relied upon the Santa Cruz ditch channels as a water source for irrigation. Irrigation days were scheduled on Sundays or Mondays, where the process began at 5 in the morning, and we were out there until about 12 in the afternoon to 2 in the afternoon to make sure that these crops were getting their full nutrients. And so we were able to also plant 45 rows of these crops, which included 20 rows of ripe corn, 4 rows of hatch chili, 3 rows of tepary beans, 2 rows of amaranth, some Indian tobacco, purple string beans, yellow onions, carrots, let's see, Cherokee purple tomatoes, Ruger's tomatoes, dipper gourds, potatoes, all the good stuff, jalapenos, cucumbers. Yeah, it was awesome. So here is a photo before planting, and this is us doing the irrigation. And so it looks pretty bare, but here is an after photo of what it looks like and after you do the irrigation process. And so this is this photo on the top was actually taken probably in June or in May, and then the bottom photo was taken at the beginning of August. So at San Pedro, the crops were irrigated every day to help grow to its full potential. I also added nutrients and used mulch to help these soils retain water. I also used it also should be known that some of these crops were grown purposely next to each other to enhance biological interactions within the field. Like crops such as corn were planted 2 feet from each other to act as a blockage of wind to prevent the wind from causing fatalities to amaranth and tobacco. Corn also consumes nitrogen, and so beans were planted next to the corn so that way the beans can give nitrogen back to the corn. And then also the tomatoes were grown right next to the gourds because gourd flowers attract bees, and bees are like to eat the insects that are killing the tomatoes. So that was another reason why we grew those next to each other. And it also should be known that gourds cannot be grown on the floor and the base. You have to have like a fence nearby so that way they can grow above, because if they get too much water, they could rot. So let's talk about the seed bank care and inventory. So at Santa Clara Pueblo, there is the main seed house that Roxanne takes care of. It's made of adobe structure, and it contains a lot of heirloom and land raised seeds that are used to cultivate only within Santa Clara Pueblo. Roxanne is the carrier for these seeds and is willing to trade seeds with anyone in the community who are interested in native plant cultivation. During the internship, I was able to help Roxanne organize seeds into small packets and disperse them out to the community and help with keeping the seed bank clean when needed. Another seed bank that I got to work with is the one located at the Poeh Museum in Pueblo, New Mexico. The seeds within captivity were cultivated and collected by different members of the Pueblo community. At the time, the members of the community wanted to share a seed bank, but it has been years since someone has shown interest in cultivating the same seeds again. So it was my duty to record and catalog each of these seeds and organize them into a digital database. I was successful in capturing 54 different types of heirloom seed species under professional lighting, and I used my phone. And so there's an example of, I caught one with my phone, the Navajo pumpkin seeds on your left side. I was also obligated to find a carrier for these seeds, but I was not able to be successful in that. So with traditional food processing, we use a lot of corn and a lot of other crops that are grown in the field. But the ones that I harvested during the internship are actually grown in the field from previous years, and they just needed someone to process it. So I was able to take part in that and process some of the corn and amaranth. So here is a picture of some dried corn that was harvested. And what you do is after you harvest, they're probably wet. So what you're gonna wanna do is probably hang them up high where they can dry in a room outside on a porch or something. And then once they dry, you can get these corn and then take off the stalk. And then we put it into this corn chucker where it kind of takes off the kernels off the cob. And so this is me doing that. And then after you get all the seeds off the cob, you want to put the seeds into a bowl and then clean them out, which is called winnowing. And we usually winnow with fans. And so this is me cleaning off all that, the cob remnants off the seeds, and yeah. And then after that, you can roast your corn, but you don't have to. But if you want to make some good food, then it's highly recommended that you roast it. And so here is a grinding technique that is traditionally used for Pueblo people. There is a woman's house located in Santa Clara, Pueblo, and I was actually privileged enough to take part in this grinding process and also connect with other women from other Pueblo communities. You can also use this grinding mill to grind corn, and it's actually pretty fast. So, but if you get tired, Roxanne has built a bike to a grinding mill, and so you can ride a bike and grind corn at the same time. And so we were able to put some of that corn mill into some packets, and we can disperse them out to the community. And so with processing amaranth, what you do is you get the leaves and make sure they're dry, and you have to like shake them off with your hands, and they fall into a bucket. And once they all fall into a bucket, you have to clean it off more. So with that, we winnow the amaranth seeds by doing this method that Roxanne is doing. But you have to be careful because the seeds are really tiny, and you can blow these seeds anywhere where you're blowing them at, and they can grow pretty fast in that area. So another aspect of this internship is that we were able to get involve the community. So this particular Pueblo food experience is a great way to engage interest in learning about why Flowering Tree advocates for sustainable living and revive traditional foods. The Pueblo food experience is an experiment that anyone could try to determine if their Pueblo foods are positively correlated with your body response. The Pueblo food experience consists of only eating and drinking food from the ancestral Puebloans people ate pre-contact colonization. The person who is experimenting needs to take their weight and takes a blood test, and then after a month or after 3 months of doing this experience, You can take your weight again and also test your blood again to see if it has improved. But for me, during this internship, I was able to participate in a 1-month experiment, and I lost a total of 12 pounds. And my blood results were also improved. Another way we involve the community is doing outreach. A lot of people from the outside like to come visit Flowering Tree to learn about the permaculture practices and the design. And so usually we'll take these groups out to Santa Clara and show them around the property of the like the seed bank, the intercropping method. There's also a lot of like fruit trees growing around that they can harvest from. And then we'll take them to San Pedro where they can like work on activities. I remember this one particular group during the internship, which is called Camp Kepoa, and they're all non-Indigenous, but they were able to come over and like learn about Indigenous practices, which is pretty eye-opening to them. And also this like the use of extra hands with outreach groups helps to get the work fast, done at a faster rate. And also, if Indigenous communities like the Pueblo communities of the Tewa-speaking people, if they're interested in coming over to visit, we like to incorporate a lot of the language with when they come visit as well. So the last aspect of this internship was the structured development and maintenance. And so what we did at San Pedro was we did a lot of house repair and maintenance because the house is made out of wood and it's adobe structure, so it's more vulnerable to weathering. But we have to have this property really presentable to a lot of visitors, so the need of maintenance is high. And so what we did was we fixed window panels. I would mow the lawn. I would clean the inside the facility. I did a lot of things for that facility to make it look presentable. But it also helped me gain a lot of skills of using power tools and garden tools. At San Pedro, there is an old chicken coop that was built like 15 plus years ago. And Roxanne didn't think that the placement of this chicken coop wasn't appropriate, and she wants to put the chicken coop in a different area for like future chickens and turkeys can live in a safe place. So what we did is we deconstructed this chicken coop, and we were able to reconstruct another one. And I'd also tested my power tool skill development. At San Pedro, I also installed a fish pond. And this fish pond was installed because Flowering Tree is desired to start an aquaponic system. An aquaponic system is usually using fish waste to like fertilize your soils and to help your plants to grow. So it was my responsibility to make a pond. So this was my first time installing a pond, but I think I did a good job because it's working and it's continues to work. And so it's also attracts a lot of birds and attracts a lot of insects as well. And yeah, it's pretty cool. So at San Pedro, there is a desire to build a Pueblo outdoor oven, which is also called a bante, for the purpose of processing traditional meals. And throughout the internship, I was able to help Roxanne build this bante, and materials that were used were recycled cinder blocks, adobe bricks, cement, and mud. The cinder blocks were remnants of an old wall, therefore they were used to build the base of an oven structure. Once the base was stabilized, we poured the cement mixture at the top of the base for future food to be baked upon. And once the cement dried, the adobe bricks were puzzled together in a dome shape and were stabilized using mud plaster. So after plastering was finished, the oven was set dry. And once the oven was fully dried, the oven is able to be used for cooking traditional foods. So overall, the combination of using traditional ecological knowledge within agri-ecosystem management is an effective way to keep ancestral lands resilient through environmental threats. I believe that flowering tree is a good role model for farms or other agri-ecosystems in neighboring communities due to conserving and enhancing local agriculture resources. It is especially an effective model for other Pueblo communities to follow because our climate is changing and we need to look at other methods that complement traditional strategies. So since there is different methods of keeping an agro-ecosystem sustainable, Flowering Tree is looking to further advance in different methods to continue their mission. One project I know they're looking into is building a greenhouse with adobe structure, which will give it a mixture between traditional and Western science. Flowering Tree wants to continue these practices because it preserves cultural practices, and many of our younger Pueblo generations today do not know how to farm. Today, each Pueblo probably has about 10 to 20 families that are farming, but whereas in history, there was probably more than 50 families that were farming within each community. So Flowering Tree continues to seek not only nurture healthy communities, but also practice cultural preservation. So during my time at Flowering Tree, I've gained many more skills and knowledge on how to be sustainable and how to maintain a traditional agro-ecosystem. Maintaining the system of an agro-ecosystem takes a lot of work. I was out in the field 2 to 9 hours a day trying to fulfill the many projects that I needed to complete. However, this hard work was also rewarding due to the production, yield of crops, and the enhancement of complex interaction and synergisms. I was not able to be there to calculate how much yield was achieved. However, Flowering Tree employees told me that it was very abundant and that the corn was alone filled up more than half of the living room. And so as you can see in this picture, this is a lot of the corn that was harvested last year. The end result of the agroecosystem design has improved economic and ecological sustainability of agroecosystem, with the proposed management system specifically in tune with the local resource base and philosophical frameworks of traditional knowledge combined with agroecosystem principles. And it also should include that within this pandemic, this internship has really opened my eyes to, continue these practices because you can't just like go to the store and depend on food production and whatnot from the stores in the food industry. So being able to learn how to grow your own food is actually pretty cool. It's going to help you survive through future pandemics and other future threats. So yeah, that's my presentation. And here is my lit cited. And I can then take any questions. And I just want to acknowledge Roxanne Swensel, Nicole Swensel, Lisa Cannelli, the TCBES program staff and students, the Office of Navajo Nation Scholarship and Financial Assistance, and the Native American Fish and Wildlife Society for funding me to go to school at Hilo, and to also fund me to go to back home and do this internship. And below is my information if you wanted to get a hold of me. So yeah, if you want, I can take any questions now.
Did you like the internship?
Yeah.
So I think someone asked a question of your general thoughts about the internship. Would you do it again? Would you recommend it to other people?
Oh yeah, I would definitely do it again. It was it's really hands-on, and I really like the fact that you get your hands dirty and you're out in the field and you're actually doing this reciprocation with the land, where you're actually planting the seed in the dirt, and then you're nurturing these plants, and then you're able to like eat them afterwards. So it's a very spiritual connection that you build with in this. And so yeah, I definitely highly recommend people to look into permaculture, or even to like go into traditional practices by looking at nonprofit organizations led by Indigenous people, or maybe in other agencies like tribal agencies, where you can learn both as well.
Well, we are out of time, and so I just wanted to ask you if you had any thoughts that you'd to share with the future audience of the video or our current audience?
I had fun with the TCBES program, and I am grateful that I got to experience all this. Pretty grateful.
But whatever, you know. My biggest thing is the
Right. Well, thank you very much. Becky has a question for you, but I'm going to email it to you. It's a great question.
Okay.
And we really appreciate you sharing all this hard work that you did with us. Thank you very much.